Well, thank you everyone for coming, both online, where I see on my screen, we've got a bunch of people here, and also in person. The intrepid folks who have come for the first time that one of these events has been held with an in-person component in a long time. And I'm glad that you're all here, and I'm particularly glad to be presenting here. I mean, honestly, to be presenting in an actual room for the first time in a couple of years instead of from my bedroom, it's a big improvement. As a lot of you probably know from having to do it. Just gonna see how oh yeah, there we go. So, and also thank you, Anne, for the introduction. And I'm going to spend approximately 40 minutes talking about the transition to low carbon energy in Atlantic Canada, but with a very strong focus on Nova Scotia, because that's where I do most of my work and what we've been studying the most. So I'll just dive right in. First, a little bit about Nova Scotia Community College Applied Research and Applied Energy Research. We do very practical research and development kinds of projects. A lot of them are with local companies. Some of them are startups, and they're all in the sustainable energy space. So there are things like, well, I'll give you some examples, but prototypes of new sorts of solar panels or different ways of storing energy that will help test. Also, we have I'll just move to that one. So we got some examples, but we have also a set of projects that are related to data and data analysis. So collecting data related to energy and providing data visualization and data analysis. And here we have some examples of some of the things that we have worked on in this field in the past 3 years. And top of the list, and you'll notice a pattern that we actually have a lot of projects related to energy storage. And I'm going to talk later about why that's important and why there's so much emphasis on that now. But two of our projects, looking at phase change materials as a storage medium, and I'll talk a bit about what that is. And also very ordinary electric hot water tanks being used as an energy storage method, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can read what the rest of them are, but I'm going to mention some of them. I'm going to give some more details about some of them. But I don't have an extra slide about the community solar data project, so I'll tell you a little bit about that one. That's interesting. It's a project to actually gather the solar energy production data from about 400 solar power systems around the province of Nova Scotia, put it into one database where researchers can access it. Thank you. We're admitting some more people who have arrived. This little thing going to go away, or should I exit, close it? Okay. Not sure how to move the different things on the screen, but I guess you can see most of the text of what I'm displaying here. So thermal energy storage. Here is an example. We have helped develop prototypes. Let me see if I'm going to make this smaller.
Yes, that'll do it.
There we go. Okay. A heat storage system based on phase change materials. So that I'm going to explain a bit what that is. A phase change material is a material that obviously goes through a phase change, typically with a change in temperature. And the kind that we're working with, it changes from a kind of a fairly solid material, like very hard coconut oil, to a liquid. And like a lot of phase changes, that phase change requires a lot of energy. And then when it solidifies again, it gives that heat back off. And it's actually not a trade secret. The main one we're working with is sodium acetate trihydrate, which is a super common material. It's actually in those hand warmers that are reusable, little packets of hand warmer gel, where you click the little thing in it, and it gets hot for about 20 minutes. And then to get it back, you've got to boil it in hot water to remelt it. What's interesting about that material, besides it's non-toxic and it works like this, I mean, it's kind of a cool material in that way. It will supercool. So its temperature of that phase change is around 60 Celsius, but it'll sit there at room temperature, 20, 10 lower, and not re-solidify until you catalyze it with that little click. So that's why you can store energy for a long time in there without losing heat from it. And that's, of course, why it's being adapted into thermal energy storage systems for homes. So the market space that this operates in is, if folks know electric thermal storage unit, that's basically a bunch of bricks that are heated up to a very high temperature. And that effectively stores energy, but it loses a lot of heat because it's always being held at that high temperature. So we're working with actually 2 companies doing that. Neothermal Energy Storage, which is a drawing of their system. We've helped build prototypes with them. And Stash Energy, which has one that you can sort of see the units there. It's a regular heat pump on the outside, and then the inside unit has the phase change materials in it, so it can store heat. And in both these cases, the idea is that when there's plentiful electricity and prices are low, you use it to heat up these phase change materials. And then later, when you have a peak demand or electricity is expensive, then you stop using it. And for 4 hours, this can still provide heat to your home from the material that's in it. So that's an example of some of the things that we've been working on. You know, just to say, it's energy storage, but it's not the same as an electrical battery. When you say energy storage, people think of an electrical battery, but thermal energy in a home actually is the large majority in the Nova Scotia climate of the energy that the home uses. So storing thermal energy is just as valuable and can be less expensive than some kinds of batteries are very expensive. And speaking of affordable thermal energy storage, what's pictured here is 2 very ordinary electric hot water heaters, which are, of course, also a form of energy storage. I mean, it's a storage for hot water. And what we're working with companies on here is the idea that you control when these heaters are on and when they're off remotely through a management system, so that you can manage the demands on the grid. So, and we've studied, we have all this data on when people use hot water. That's another project that we've been collecting. A lot of hot water being used in the morning, showering time, as you can imagine, and in the evening with dishwashing and so on. But it turns out that there's enough hot water in these tanks that the vast majority of households don't use it up in their evening time. So you could turn this water heater off for 2-3 hours during the evening peak time, and no one would ever notice. And of course, there's technologies that have done that for years. In the 1950s, people were putting water timers on water heaters and heater timers on water heaters in Bulgaria, for example. A friend was telling me. But this is more sophisticated. It can operate, the idea is they'll be operating 10,000 or 100,000 of these timed exactly to when the electricity demand is highest on the grid. So we're working on testing projects like that in the category of what is often referred to as smart grid. So different sorts of appliances that respond to the needs of the electrical system. Microgrid development. This is one example of a very small, what's called a microgrid. So it gets solar power in. You see the solar panels. There's a container there. It's got batteries in it. They store the energy. It's basically a power supply system that can be packed up. You can pack the solar panels into it. It takes about a whole day, but packed up, and that can be shipped. It's a regular size 20-foot shipping container. So we built one of those and we've tested it in various ways. One thing we do with it is charge this electric car to test how much it can perform and how long the batteries last and all that sort of thing. So this is more related to power supply in remote locations, although microgrids are becoming a popular concept also, even as little nodes within the larger electrical grid. So that was just some examples of what we do. I'm glad to sort of answer questions about those examples at the end, or talk about some of the other projects that we have. We normally have about 5 or 6 projects on the go Another one I didn't mention, we're studying different kinds of new solar photovoltaic cells and modules to test their efficiency. Got a bunch of them installed up on the roof and testing them and so on. But I'm going to change gears a little bit and really get back to kind of the topic or the focus of what I wanted to talk about this evening. And that is really about this region and the transition to low carbon energy, and especially Nova Scotia, but also to put it in a global context. This might have been a coincidence or not, but of course this is a well-chosen date or month to be doing a talk about this topic with the climate change negotiation meetings going on. Go right ahead. Catherine, that's a friend of mine in Toronto. Hi, Catherine. Joining a little late, but obviously this global transition is happening, and we'll see a little bit about that. This, it's often spoken about as something that we must do, and that's true. We have to find a way to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions significantly because of the impact that it's having on the climate and the long-term effect that is going to have. But a lot of the people I work with, and I've started to take this point of view about it as well, is to see it as an opportunity, because there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, and that's business opportunity in terms of implementing renewable energy generation. This transition is global. So, for example, Nova Scotia itself, and even all of Canada, the whole emissions of that region, of our province and our country, are a very small portion of the total global emissions. But it's a very big opportunity that we're facing. Also, if we can be providing solutions that work here and in other places. Atlantic Canada is moving to low carbon energy, as we'll see. We've made actually more progress than a lot of provinces have in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And a kind of a spoiler alert, I'm going to argue that it has sort of come a time that we can focus our attention on very specific sectors, and I'm going to look at transport in particular. And I'll explain why I'm focusing there. Okay, so one of those things at a time. Globally, renewable energy is growing at a phenomenal pace. These are figures from the International Energy Agency on annually, well, they're in 2-year periods, but average annual renewable energy capacity addition to the electricity system. So to put that in kind of ordinary terms, how much power capacity to generate electricity is added each year in renewables. And that's in gigawatts. And obviously anything can grow quickly if it starts small, and that is the case with renewables. But it's come to the point that these are very large. Actually, in 2020, the additions of renewable electricity generation capacity to the global grid were majority renewables. In other words, more renewables than any other kind. And when I say renewable, of course, it's the same sorts of definitions, sources that are constantly renewed and supplied. And in practice, what these are is mostly wind and solar, wind energy and solar energy, which we'll talk a bit about. There's a little bit of additional hydroelectricity in here, but of this 280-ish gigawatts added, 100 in the 2020 year, 160 was solar, and something near a little under 100 was wind. So this is mostly about solar energy and wind energy accelerating. And that is happening to a degree in Canada. Just back one sec. 2020, obviously this goes out to 2022, so it's a bit of a projection, but they do have the numbers for 2020, and it was a record-breaking year despite the pandemic. Lots of things slowed down during the pandemic, but renewable energy installation was not one of them. Canada actually did see a tiny slowdown, but there still was more wind power and solar added in Canada. So this is from the Canadian Renewable Energy Association, and they chart how much wind power and solar power is installed in Canada on a yearly basis. And as you can see, it has been going up dramatically since 2007. The green large bars are wind, and the blue small bars are solar. Part of the context here, it is worth knowing about Canada that 61% of the electricity generated in Canada is hydroelectricity anyway, which is also considered a renewable. That is very provincially dependent. There are 4 provinces with a lot. So Quebec, Manitoba, Newfoundland and Labrador, and British Columbia all have a lot of hydro. And as we'll see, other ones don't, like Nova Scotia does not have that much hydroelectricity. I'm going to kind of, again, on the theme of greenhouse gas emissions and related to the meetings that are